But what about this rubbish that he was pushing at the Labor Party conference, and Starmer tried to do it as well, which is basically, unless you vote for us, democracy is under threat. Sorry, people will be able to walk into a ballot box and they will make their choice, and whatever choice that will be the democratic outcome. But when the outcome isn't what they want, the collective or the obvious here, then somehow the system is failing. You're not planning on storming number 10. You're planning to get there because you'll have more seats than anyone else.
Yeah, democracy doesn't work for them unless it's them that are winning. They use the same arguments against Trump in America. Vote for Trump, democracy will be over. That same argument being made, by our Australian visitor this week. It's completely outrageous. But since then, it's got worse. The Labour conference now, literally, my name appears in almost every single sentence on the stage. It is totally obsessive. It is abusive. They have absolutely sunk to the gutter, throwing around the racism word and all the rest of it. And what it tells you is that this is a Prime Minister who is on his last legs. This really is the very last throw of the dice for his own survival as a leader. And they're throwing all of it at me. Do you know what? I think they're making the biggest mistake of their political career. Because if you think that people who want controlled borders, if you think that people who want illegals deported, if you believe that philosophy is racist, then you're basically telling over half the country that they're racist. It is a stupid, weak thing to do from a Prime Minister who I'd always thought was a perfectly reasonable human being. But to use that word repeatedly, to get your cabinet to use that word, all that is doing is inciting ill feeling against reform, its elected officials, our campaigners. And I would have thought that in the wake of the Charlie Kirk murder, it's just about the last thing he should have done. I hope this Prime Minister wakes up tomorrow ashamed of himself. And I'm now of the view he is wholly unfit to be our Prime Minister.
Huge and important to say. By the way, opinion poll of Labor members, 53% of them say it's time to move on from this bloke. So this is the desperate phase of his leadership, but it's also the disgraceful phase because, as you said, Nigel, and it's really important to stop down on this, right, which is, all the conversation about America is, the rhetoric's all up through the roof, right? If you want to keep telling people that if this bloke gets elected, it's the end of the country, it's the end of democracy, then we know how absolute maniacs interpret that on the other side of things, and they somehow believe that the cause is greater than the consequences, and God forbid that that's even in anyone's mind. But if you've got day after day after day the supposedly responsible people around the room saying, watch out for this bloke who's steaming towards us, that's diabolical.
It is. It's an absolute disgrace. And I just didn't think Keir Starmer as a human being would do it. But he's done it. They've obviously whipped the whole of the cabinet to go along with the line. And it isn't just racist, as you say. I'm the greatest threat ever to our country. I mean, I'm worse than the Germans were in 1940. I mean, the whole thing's unbelievable. But, fair-minded people will see it for what it is. The worry, as you say, is that it emboldens, it entices those on the extreme left and who believe with their own moral superiority that somehow, I will have to be stopped. It is, I think, a very deeply regrettable moment in British politics, the likes of which I've never seen before. And I promise you this, I would never sink to those depths. I would disagree with you. I would argue with you. I might tease you a bit, but I would never, ever sink to those depths.
No, well said. And I think it's why people are continuing that surge again. Latest polling, it shows you way out in front. Not at the full majority yet, but clearly the one that would be easily the one forming a government after the next election, which is, again, multiple years away. I just wanted to ask, though, which is obviously, organisation, membership, ideas, policy focus, all the rest of it changes with every day that this result gets closer to being potentially what's going to take place. But I had to ask, does the media see themselves in the Labor Party view of things, which is let's stop this bloke at all costs, which means the types of questions, the type of reportage that comes out, or are some people surprisingly smart enough to work out, hey, if this is what people want, let's give the benefit of the doubt and start jumping over the lazy questions and starting to get to that, well, okay, if you're the Prime Minister, what about this, what about that?
I think that there are elements of the hard left media who, of course, would agree with the Prime Minister, but they're a very, very small part of our media spectrum. Most of the centrist, centre-leftists would think this attack on me, on my policies, and therefore, by implication, anyone that believes in those policies, most sensible centrist commentators think he's made a mistake and he's gone completely over the top. On the right side of the media, increasingly what I'm seeing are newspapers that have supported the Conservative Party for over 100 years are beginning to realise that actually it's only us that can beat Socialist Labour at the next election. So, I'm not even complaining about the media. I think they're being reasonably balanced and fair across the board. What I'm complaining about is a Prime Minister who has descended into the gutter in an effort to save his own skin.
Yeah, bloody oath. All right, last one here, and there's, again, many more things to talk about. Digital ID, we'll do all of that next week. President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister have come forward to talk about a 20-point plan when it comes to Gaza. Again, in a couple of years' time, perhaps either as this is being established or it's been established, as a Prime Minister, you would have to consider how the UK would engage with this. What's your thoughts on this idea, and how much should the rest of the world be involved in it?
Well, look, I admire the attempts of Trump and the American administration to broker a peace deal. Of course I do. Of course I do. And the fact that he's got Netanyahu there, with him in the White House, on the podium next to him, these are good things. The proposals, well, look, if the hostages could be returned, wouldn't that be absolutely wonderful in every way? The question is, will Hamas accept the plan? Right. And this is the problem, isn't it? We're not dealing with a political party here. We're dealing with an ideology, and an ideology that goes down through generations. I would love to think this plan will work. I think history tells us the problem, I'm afraid, is far more deep-rooted.
Absolutely. Lovely to talk to you. Again, what a disgrace about some of the stuff being said, but
thank you.
Keep being the happy warrior, mate. That's what we love seeing from the other side of the world, and we're cheering you on. All the best.